Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature in the University of Calcutta. Today we'll discuss translation in colonial India. It is Unit 5 and the module is on translation and the making of modern Indian languages. Modern Indian languages had been shaping since the medieval period of Indian literary history. Translation of Vedic, Sanskritic, and the Arabic Persian literature and knowledge text had been translated in different modern Indian languages in the medieval era itself. Through the translation of Vedic and Sanskrit literature and knowledge text especially, the Loko Bhasha or Desi Bhasha or the Bhasha were getting its shape and forms of writing. Socio-political reality also was one of or maybe most powerful driving forces in the emergence of modern Indian languages in medieval India. Through this emergence, the narrative of the local, narrative of the lower caste, lower class, and the people who had no access to the Sanskrit were getting their narrative unfolded into literature. And when I mention the word bhasha or loko bhasha or deshi bhasha, it means that we are trying to addressing the Indian languages, because most of the Indian languages, modern Indian languages, most of the modern Indian languages were known as bhasha or loko bhasha or desi bhasha, because Sanskrit was bhasha, language of God, Deva Bhasha. Now, modern Indian languages in the medieval era were used as a tool of expression in the manuscript culture. The oral tradition in local languages or in Deshi Bhasha already was there, but the writing tradition helped non-Sanskrit people to fight with the literary merit or the merit of knowledge found and recorded in Sanskrit through manuscript culture. It was also an urge of the authors and poets of the local who wanted to write for their own people, wanted to educate their own people with the literature and knowledge found in high literary and knowledge tradition. Modern Indian languages produced immense number of great literatures. Moreover, great traditions which hold the mind and history of the communities of India. Languages got their proper shape for literary expression in medieval era only, as modern Indian languages are the languages of the Indian people. So these became a matter of imperial interest of the British. Hence, modern Indian languages in medieval India and modern Indian languages in modern India is drastically different in the sense of being patronized. Modern Indian languages in modern India were an apparatus for establishing imperial rules, were tool for colonization. Language as gives access to the culture and cultural text. Modern Indian languages in British India were brought into print culture, into European education, used in administration, used to bring European knowledge and culture into Indian system, etc. Modern Indian languages in colonial period was not only used for the purpose of colonization or establishing more soothing administration by the British, but systematic practice of language also had happened during the course of the time. Pedagogy of language learning, learning of literature, making of textbooks, introduction of Indian languages into British institutions in India also happened. As printing press came into different modern Indian languages in 19th and first half of 20th century, whole notion of readership and reading culture also had been changed. People were introduced to private reading culture, before that which was community reading of literary or religious manuscripts. All the modern European literary genres began to be translated into different modern Indian languages through the translation of the Bible, the Iliad and the Odyssey, translation of Shakespeare, the Arabian Nights, and of course Sanskrit literature. Modern Indian languages came across different literary genres and themes. This cross-cultural encounter prepared modern Indian languages to adapt those genres and themes one side and appropriated the languages for writing those genres like novel, literary mahakavyas, lyric poetry, theatrical drama, short story, and so on. In colonial period, the work of translation, which had great influence in Indian languages and which helped Indian prose to be developed, is Bible translation. To write the review of the book, The Bible Society of India, 1811 to 2000, imagining the word of millennium perspective by Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal and G.D.V. Prasad, The Hindu newspaper The Hindu writes on 2nd October 2001, which is indeed an entire observation about the Bible in India. And this review, in very brief, pointed out the role of the Bible translation in making of modern Indian languages. It says, I quote, "There is perhaps no single book that has been translated into so many diverse tongues as the Bible. Here is a very interesting and illuminating narrative of an institution that has involved itself for the translation of the Bible into wide-ranging Indian languages, from Marathi to Mundari, from Bodo to Bengali, from Sindhi to Santhali. Some of the pioneering missionaries mastered the major languages and dialects of the country, and they employed their expertise to translate the Bible. It may not be an exaggeration to state that the story of the translation of the Bible and its publication is also the story of the Indian languages and the history of printing in India. We are also able to identify the conviction about the importance of local languages. They brought to the local people a sense of pride about their own languages." Unquote. So such kind of influence was there of Bible among Indian languages. It's not only about the development of Indian language, or it's not only about the development of Indian prose style, but it was also about to give confidence to the people about their own language, that they can also express their knowledge and their emotion in their own language. Bible translation, along with translation of Upanishad or Namaha. Namaha is a Persian literary genre from was responsible for making prose as a form of literary and non-literary expression. But a large number of translations of the Bible are found in different Indian languages, and none of the texts were translated in such large scale. So this translation of the Bible, mainly by the European missionaries, solely or with the help of Indians, was served two purposes. One is giving people the words of the God and practicing the modern form of language. One side, religion was spread; other side, people got their literary expression in different ways. One side, translation of philosophical text from Sanskrit into modern Indian languages brought language of God to common people, and the other side, Bible translation, did the same. First translation of Bible, according to the Bible Society of India, happened into Tamil by a German missionary named Bartholomew Ziegenbalg in 1714. He finished translation Old Testament up to Book of Ruth by 1719, year of his death also. The remaining work was completed by another German missionary, Benjamin Schulz, and published in Frankfurt in 1728. Philip Fabricius, also a German, spent 24 years on the translation of the Bible, which was published in 1777. Urdu translation of the Bible was published quite earlier than any other modern Indian language edition other than the Tamil Bible. Benjamin Schulz of the Danish mission translated New Testament into Dakhani Urdu in 1745, and Fort William College published 4 Gospels in Nagari script in 1805. And this was a result of the same historical incident of missionaries coming into the land of Tamil. Both the languages got their first Bible by the Danish missionaries. First Bengali translation of the Bible, New Testament, came out by the one of the pioneer of the Bengali prose, William Carey, in 1801. And finally, Dr. Wagner edited the completed Bible and published it in 1862. Meanwhile, work had been undergone several editing and published in part by part. Carey comments on translation helps to understand the work of translation as a collaborative work and the sincerity he took for translating Bible into Bengali. According to him, I quote, "I employ a Pandit with whom I go through the whole in as exact manner as I can. He judges the style and syntax and I of the faithfulness of the translation. I have, however, translated several chapters together which have not required any alteration in the syntax whatever. Yet I always submit this article entirely to his judgment. I can also, by hitting him read, judge whether he understands his subject by his accenting his reading properly and laying the emphasis on the right words. If he fails in this, I immediately suspect the translation." So we can understand what kind of collaborative work was this and how much sincerity and dedication was needed for translating such kind of text. And in colonial period, missionaries as well as the Pandits were so serious about translating at least a religious text like Bible. The first Hindi translation of the Bible came out in 1806 by Henry Thomas Colebrook, and it was 4 Gospels. Sirampur missionaries published first volume of New Testament in Hindi in 1811. William Carey was appointed as the professor of 3 languages. One among those 3 languages was Marathi at the College of Fort William in Calcutta, and he published 1000 copies of the Marathi New Testament in 1807 from Fort William College, Calcutta. Carey again wrote about his translation that I have never yet suffered a single word or a single mode of construction pass without examining it and seeing through it Brother Marshman, and I compare with the Greek or Hebrew, and Brother Word reads every sheet. The complete edition of the New Testament into Marathi came out in 1848, and whole Bible as a 1-volume book was first published in 1855. Malayalam translation of Bible is quite interesting. It is historically very much different than any other Bible translation of Indian languages. 4 Gospels into Malayalam was translated in 1807. And it was translated from Syriac language with a few help from Tamil versions by Timafa Pillai and Philippos. But this translation was published in 1811 under the auspices of British and Foreign Bible Society. First Odia translation of the Bible was published in 1809 from the Bengali translation done by William Carey. Odia translation also happened under the auspices of William Carey, and he did this job successfully with his translator group, and he also took help from a Pandit. William Carey also had a great contribution in the translation of Marathi Bible. Assamese translation of the Bible began in the year of 1810 at the Sirampur Mission, Kolkata, and the New Testament was published in 1819. Completed version appeared in 1832. The Bible Society of India's evaluation of this edition of the Bible claims the work as unsatisfactory. It proved to be of little practical use, largely through carelessness and perversity of the Pandit who was employed, and through containing too large an element of Sanskrit words. Later it was pursued by the American Baptist Mission, which is abbreviated as ABM, and in 1847 Nathan Brown's version of the New Testament was issued. From 1860 onwards, portions of the Old Testament were issued as they were translated by various hands, though it was not till 1903 that the completed Old Testament, revised by A.K. Gurney of ABM, was published. The Sirampur missionaries appeared to have completed their translation of the New Testament into Kannada by 18 09. The list of the Bible translation in India is too long. Here very few are introduced for you. The Bible translation not only influenced or contributed in the development of the languages of established and powerful culture, but this whole project of translating Bible contributed immensely in the development of northeastern languages of different indigenous communities. The scenario of the Bible translation is quite different in northeastern languages than any other modern Indian languages. Here translation was observed as demand. Translation was intrinsic with people's religious and cultural identity. Bible translation not only developed their languages but offered them a powerful tool of self-identity and established the language as the confidence of the community. Tarao Christian of Nagaland strongly expressed their need for Bible translation in their own language. Though their population is very less, the Bible Society of India also observed the need of the community, and they published 4 Gospels in Tarao translation in January 2009. It's very recent phenomena, not the colonial phenomena, but we are talking about the translation of the Bible in northeastern languages because it's the heritage of Bible translation of India, and equally Bible translation helped to develop Indian languages and to develop Indian prose style, and it helped this phenomena in colonial period, and the same happened in 20th century and 21st century. So in continuation, we believe that we should concentrate also on the translation of Bible in northeastern languages, that this way northeastern languages are getting their power, they are recognized, they get their own language of writing prose and writing literature. It's all about community confidence. The biblical tracts and portions were first published in Amrikarbi language in 1987. Gradually, the number of Christians also increased in this community, and the New Testament project in this language has been launched in 2004. Bible translation has its immense contribution in the development of prose in Indian language, as I already mentioned earlier. One of the early prose book printed in Indian languages is Malayalam prose, and that is Shamskepa Vedartham, based on Compendium Doctrine of Christianity by Father Clement, printed in Rome in 1772. And we should remember 1772, the birth year of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, who will be one of the most influential and one of the pioneering figures of developing Indian prose and bringing Sanskrit knowledge, especially Vedanta and Veda, in any of Indian language, and to offer a discursive framework, argumentative framework of Indian languages, in modern Indian language. Though there are many examples in Indian languages that show that prose is not creation of Christian missionaries only or the British officials, opined by Shishir Kumar Das and Nagendra. At least there was prose practiced in India in pre-colonial period, in writing letter and in preparing different legal notes. Christian missionaries took interest in Indian languages long before British officials did. So it is not only the credit of the British officials. British officials did it quite later, when European education was expanded all over India, and British officials need Indian languages to carry on smoothly their administration. But before British officials, it was only the Christian missionaries who translated Bible, and this way they helped to develop Indian prose and Indian language. But we should also remember that it is not only about the British officials and Christian missionaries, but in pre-modern period also, there was prose practices in different Indian languages. As I mentioned, that in case of writing literature and writing legal notes, prose were practiced. But it gets its proper shape and styles in colonial period. Now, one of the major area of colonial translation practice was pedagogy, because school book society published so many textbooks for the schools, and it was the time of European education which was expand over the country. So pedagogy was one of the most significant thing in case of translation, especially the making abridged version and literature. As I mentioned, that School Book Society translated abridged versions of different texts from Indian and European literature and history to introduce textbooks. So pedagogic experiment was happened during the time through textbook selection and practices. Shishir Kumar Das commented in his second volume of the History of Indian Literature. Apart from the translation of the Bible, which were available in most of the languages, translation of other works was produced mainly to meet the demands of pedagogy. Sargarohan Parva, a brief translation of a chapter of the Mahabharata, was published in Assamese in 1800, and abridged version of the Ramayana was published as Ramayana Kuttara Kantak Katai in Tamil in 1815. Hitopadesha was published in Bengali in 1802, and again in 1808. Hitopadesha was one of the most popular and accepted texts in different modern Indian literatures as a pedagogic text. It was published in Hindi in the title as Rajniti in 1803, and also published in Marathi in 1815. Along with Hitopadesha, Panchatantra was one other text which was very much well accepted as a pedagogic text. Panchatantra was published into Marathi in 1815 and in Telugu in 1834. Lalluji Lal, one of the renowned teachers of the College of the Fort William, Calcutta, translated Bhagavata into Braj Bhasha, Braj language in 1803, and in Braj language it was one of the early translation or even early modern text. These above-mentioned texts were mostly translated by the Srirampur missionaries or by the Fort William College. But more significant contribution of the missionaries was translation and making of dictionaries in different Indian languages. Thus commented that the most lasting contribution of the missionaries was, of course, the pedagogical materials, the lexicons, and the grammars, which served as models for the native grammarians and lexicographers. Joseph Baschi prepared a grammar in colloquial Tamil. Such kind of works helped modern Indian languages to have a methodological study of language. This was for the first time through this practice of lexicography and dictionary making, Indian languages were mapped. A new inspiration of writing grammar following the models already existed in the European languages began in Indian languages. This work itself is work of translation by nature, and in other way, dictionaries is one of the basic needs for translating between languages. Beside the translation of Bible, translation of pedagogic text, there were huge reception of Sanskrit literature and Sanskrit philosophy in different Indian languages. And one text, I can mention specially one text, it is by Jayadeva. The text is Gita Govinda, which had immense influence all over the India, and different translation in Indian languages happened of this text. Two major trends are found in colonial Indian translation. One is translation of European literature and knowledge text, and the other is Sanskrit literature and philosophy, as I mentioned earlier. So these two are very prominent trend of translation in colonial India. All the great books of literature especially were translated from Sanskrit in different Indian languages. Srirampur Mission, Fort William College, Asiatic Society of Kolkata played pioneering role in this project. Several British and European press and later the printing press owned by Indians also engaged in such translation project, especially the Bottala publishing area of northern Kolkata of colonial time appeared as a pioneer to bring masses in reading translated literature in 19th century and early half of the 20th century. Why I mentioned that Bortola especially brought the masses towards the book, because it was this publishing, Bortola was publishing hub, and this industry has quite interesting characteristic, because the owners of the press, they used to publish the books, and they themselves used to sell the book, and they used to move from one door to another door of the household people with the books, and it so many books are push selling also, and this is how Bortola printing zone made a culture of reading. And if we see the history of Bortola, then we can find that this printing area was most secular area, because one side it was published Rammohan's Vedanta Grantha, when Rammohan began translating the Vedanta. Another side, they translated Bible, they translated Islamic text from Arabic and Persian languages, and they introduced so many new literary genres into Bengali, into Urdu, into Hindustani, and so on languages. Rammohan Roy translated Vedanta Grantha in 1815. Ishapanishad, Kenopanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Kathapanishad, and Mundaka Upanishad were translated by him, as he wanted to place monotheistic doctrines of the ancient Hindus as against popular Hinduism. His translation revived ancient Indian culture of dialogue and argumentation. He offered a discursive prose of commentary and debate, which was remarkable. Thus commented about such translation that they gave a momentum to the newly emerging prose of intellectual discourse. Not only from the Sanskrit or the Bible translation, but in colonial period we can find so many translation happened among the Indian languages. Though the number was not like the translation of Sanskrit literature or translation of any European literature or Bible, but this trend was initiated in colonial period, and it was quite satisfactory. Translation from one Indian language into another happened in this period, as I mentioned earlier. Instances are few but significant. Shishir Kumar Das commented it in the second volume of his A History of Indian Literature. The Manipuri language Shakt Thaba, believed to be composed around 1802, is a translation of a Bengali Ramayana. Marathi Raja Pratapaditya Charita 1816, translation of Bengali Raja Pratapaditya Charitra of 1801. The first Bengali prose narrative was published from Fort William College. The Tamil work Panchatantrika Katai 1825 was translated from Marathi. It was quite interesting that Panchatantrika Katai was not translated directly from the Sanskrit, but it was translated from the Marathi. It means that Marathi and Tamil literary connection and the cultural connection was there into some extent. Bengali Manjo Ranjana Tihas by Tarachand Datta translated into Marathi, as where Bodh Katha was translated in 1830, Bhugol evam Jyotish Ityadi Bishayak Kathapakathan was translated in 1832. And this is how the way among Indian languages, the way of traveling of prose among Indian languages were established. One of the most popular category of translation was fairy tales and fables. Especially the Aesop's fables were translated in almost all the major modern Indian languages. And Fort William content translation of fables into Bengali, Hindi and Urdu in 1803, and all the translation of Aesop's fable in all these three languages together published as the Oriental Fabulist in 1803. And from Sanskrit, English and other European languages translation were there, and it was so prominent in colonial India. But Arabic Persian culture also was there, because the residual of the Persian culture which was there in medieval India were also existing in colonial India as a residual. Persian works translated into Urdu from 1801 to 1804, such as Araish-e Mahfil in 1801, Guns-e-Khubi 1802, Bug-e-Bahar 1804, and Tutinama. Tutinama was one of the most influential texts of Persian, and it was translated into Bengali as Tota Itihash. Parashya Itihash adapted from Arabian Nights in Bengali in 1834. Other than Bible translation and translation from Sanskrit literature, there was immense translation practice of Shakespeare's plays, Shakespeare's sonnets. All those things were translated in almost all the major Indian languages, major modern Indian languages. At least it was translated immensely in 16, 17 languages, and only in Bengali we can find more than 100 translation in the first half and second half of the 19th century. And through the translation of Shakespeare play, a new genre came into Indian language. The whole notion of writing play actually changed with the translation and practice of Shakespeare's play. The development, the origin and development of play or drama in modern Indian language actually happened because of influence of Sanskrit drama and the translation of plays written by Shakespeare. So Shakespeare had immense influence to establish, to introduce, or to make the dialogic form of language in Indian languages. And Shakespeare translation made this dialogic form more sharper. Now, let us conclude our discussion saying that there were a whole lot of creative literatures in different Indian languages, in different traditions throughout the medieval era. And modern India, we found different European genres which were adapted in Indian literary practices. But it is translation, always which had been flowing since the medieval era and shapes the language and makes the language useful for the spatial and temporal expression. Translation accompanies language in our history. Translation guides language too. And the significance of reading whole history of colonial translation is it helps us to read the colonial history in different way. So translation proposes a history of colonial India in its own claim, in its own right. And the translation, what happened from different European languages and Sanskrit language into different modern Indian languages, it suddenly didn't happen in colonial period only, but it was continuation of the translation which had been started in medieval era itself through Bhakti movement and through the consciousness of the common people, through the translation of the Ramayana, Mahabharata and the Vedic literature. So the translation culture of colonial period was continuation of that culture which was initiated in medieval era. But in colonial era, it got its own pace. In colonial era, it got in its own speed, and all the modern forms, modern writing style, prose, all these things introduced in modern Indian languages. But not only that, in our discussion we are mostly talking about the languages and the influential text, but we should also remember through this translation which happened in colonial period, the modern Indian literature also modern Indian literatures also are greatly influenced, because so many modern modern literary genres were introduced in modern Indian literatures, like novels, like short stories, like lyric poetries, all these things. And so Scott was translated, Keats was translated, Shelley, Byron were translated, Milton was translated widely. And not only it's about the English, the French drama and French literature like French novel, short stories and poetry also had immense influence and also were translated widely in colonial era in different Indian languages. So through our discussion we can find that there were major trends of translating Indian literature, translation in Indian literature in colonial period. One was translation translation from European literature, another was translation from Sanskrit literature, and the other one was translation from Arabic and Persian literature. Though it practice very less, but it is significant that few translation we can find from among the Indian languages. And it's not only about the translation of knowledge text, but different literary genres also are translated. And this is how we got our modern Indian literatures and all the modern literary forms into Indian literature. And this is how our Indian languages, modern Indian languages developed, and modern Indian languages got its proper shape, style, and syntax for writing prose. Thank you.